Carmel Ministries. We invite you to join us on an inspiring journey as we go into all corners of the world. Together, we spread messages of hope and salvation, making disciples of all nations and baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God has given us a mission, and that mission is to reach out and connect with those in need of Jesus. Join us on our mission for souls.
So one of the things that I wanted to kind of first start us off with is, it's my understanding that the Christian nationalist movement is really an answer to some of the godless atheism and secularism that we have seen become rampant in our society.
As defined in Dr. Moore's book, where he spoke of perilous ditches on either side of the Christian pathway. And he warns us to avoid them. Avoid the extreme. I am not a fanatic. I don't even like fanatics.
The first law that our country should bring back at the county or state levels should be a Sunday blue law, and that should be to restrict ordinary commerce so that people would be encouraged to attend church.
All liars and all false prophets are going to be exposed.
The level of don't care is strong with this one.
Christian nationalism, or just a robust Christian politics, is a way to energize people to get into the political process and advocate for Christian ideas.
I do believe that the Sabbath is going to be part of a reformation of our morals. I don't believe the fourth commandment has been retired in any way. This is the extent of the persecution that I'd be willing to deploy against a Seventh-day Adventist. He would not be able to go into a shop and buy a shovel. That's the extent of the
Right.
That would be the extent of the persecution.
Our people were arrested and put in chain gangs and had all kinds of persecution back in the late 19th century.
A professional friend of mine called me long distance, and in an almost desperate tone he said, "Charles, I want my church back."
All right. Happy Sabbath to everyone. Glad you guys are here with us tonight on this wonderful Friday Eve. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to be with God, to spend 124-hour time with Him, to bring in your families, to bring in your friends, and invite someone else to be with you as you spend time with the Lord. He has given us a day of celebration. And had it been another day, He would have told us. But on this wise, He has given us this day. And this is the day that the Lord has made. So let us rejoice with Him and be glad in it. Heaven is full of joy. And because heaven is full of joy, we here on earth should be full of joy alongside with the angels in heaven. Why? Because it is the Lord's day. It's from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday. We can enjoy that moment, fellowshipping, worshiping with God. I don't know what you guys feel like, but I feel like when I get to heaven, it's going to be a grandiose worship. And I can't wait for me to play the harp. Now, I don't know how to play a harp. I play a little piano here and there. I can tinkle along some chords and whatever have you. But when it comes to the harp, I'm not a harpist. And I can tell you right now that when I get to heaven, I'm going to play that harp. I don't know about you, but I'm going to play my harp. And I can't wait for that day. But until then, right now, let us rejoice in the Lord, for He is good. I would implore you to share tonight's podcast, our study tonight, please share it because there's going to be a lot of discussion on this National Sunday Law, this Mark of the Beast movement that is taking place, that's going to take us by surprise, mind you. Many folks will be surprised. I guarantee it. And this close of probation, Sister White says that it's going to take us by surprise. Many of us will not know. Of course, we would not know when the close of probation happened. But as of this time, right now, share this message so that others can get to know what is going on, and we can now start preparing ourselves for a storm that's about to take place. So, I want you guys to remember to go ahead and to register for our camp meeting that's coming up. I don't want no one to miss out on this. If you have an opportunity to come, please come. By God's grace, if just let me know what kind of help you might need, if any. That way we can help you guys in any way that we possibly can. But we want you guys to be able to come to this camp meeting. All right. So please remember to go to our website and to click on events. What am I doing here? I think I'm on clicking on events. There we go. Click on events. You will see we have 2 events right now. One is the Hope for the Homeless. The other is our camp meeting. Go out here and register for the event. It's very easy. Click that RSVP button right there. Once you do that, it will take you down. Matter of fact, it keeps you on the same page. You will go ahead and the ticket prices are right here. You just hit your checkout button and register for the event. Once you click on that, it gives you the event. Once you want to know what's going on, what the schedule is going to look like, the schedule is right here. Click on the See All right here. Once you click on the See All, it will bring you to the camp meeting schedule. You can take a look at what's going to happen every hour by the hour. Now, the schedule is, I don't think you guys can hear me. Hold on a second. Yeah. All right, let's do this again because I don't think you guys were able to hear me. I'm not too sure. Well, you guys can hear me, those who are online with me, but our online audience probably could not have heard me. So let me just go ahead and do this again. And I think we have the wrong camera going on here tonight. What's going on, Larry? Let's get it together. Come on. All right. So let's do this one more time. So I was talking about the camp meeting that we should go ahead and to register for the camp meeting. Go to Mountaintopministries on our website. Go ahead and click on events. Now, thing is, if you are a vendor and you want to provide, your products or whatever have you, your health products, anything that you want to do, click on here for vendors. Vendors are allowed to be at the camp meeting. So if you are a vendor, click on the vendor link, and that will take you to where to the camp meeting vendor, right? Here is the events. Click on the events. You go here. You got 2 events. Hope for the Homeless, which is our Thanksgiving Day drive for our homeless, for those who are more underserved and those who can be helping out during the Thanksgiving weekend. This is for the camp meeting here. Click on details. That will take you to where you can get to the camp meeting details, right? Please read everything here. There's an area called Read More. It gives you all of the information for accommodations. Please read this area. Click on the Read More and read everything. A lot of folks do call me and they ask me a lot of questions, and I know that they did not go through the website to read all the information that is there, because I'm only going to give you the information that is on the website. Okay, so there's a lot of information here. Please read your camp meeting packing list. It is important that you know what to bring. Okay, so please, for those of you who are coming, read that section there. It is important. I implore you, I behoove you that you do read this section. All right. The schedule is also there. If you want to know what's going to happen at the camp meeting, this is the schedule. Now, if you are a member, you're going to have the schedule on your phone. You can choose where you want to be. There's going to be a lot going on. So there's different things going on at the same time. You can choose what presentation you want to go to. There's going to be maps. There's going to be everything on the campus grounds, so that way you can know where you're going. Okay. But this is the schedule. We already have a menu for the dinner, and trust me, the menu is very, very good. It's going to be both vegetarian and vegan. It's going to be both vegetarian and vegan. All right. I'm giving you all this information right now because we want to see you guys there. And Sabbath is going to be really packed. There's going to be a lot going on Sabbath. We're also going to have a concert at the end of the evening to close things out. So we want you guys to be there. All right. All right. So everything is there for you guys on the website. Please go ahead, take a look at that, go through all the information. We want you guys to be at this event. Don't forget also to go ahead and sign up for the Hope for the Homeless. For those of you who want to volunteer with us, for those of you who are looking to provide any clothing, anything, we're asking that you do so. We do this a lot every year for our homeless brothers and sisters who are unhoused. And we want to take care of them as well. It's a great way to minister and to share the gospel. We also have some opportunities to volunteer at soup kitchens or at the kitchen, the homeless kitchen. We have an opportunity to to volunteer. They will need cooks. I can only bring 5 at a time, but they would need somebody. They would need us either to cook, to prepare some of the meals, to help distribute the meals to the ladies' shelter and to the men's shelter. If anybody wants to plan on speaking or has anything to do with health, if you are a person who in the health field that would like to share some good nuggets on health, like a health nugget or anything like that, please let me know so that way I can get the presentations to them. But this is opportunities for us to get out there and to share the gospel of Christ with others who are in need. Again, Mount Carmel Ministries is more than just a podcast. This is the good thing that God has blessed us with the podcast, but we are on the streets. We're in the streets, and that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are working for God in the streets. Okay, so join us if you can. Go ahead and just let us know if you want to volunteer. Also, if you have any clothes, anything like shoes, blankets, sneakers, boots, gloves, hats. We're asking for coats. We're asking for blankets, things that will that will help them stay warm over the winter times. Please provide us with those. You can send them over, have somebody pick it up for you, or call me, let me know. But if you have something, let us know. Bring it to your churches. We'll come pick it up, or we'll just have, whatever we can do. We'll get to that. Okay. But, we're just asking for help. All right. All right. Let's get going. Let's go ahead and get our crew on tonight. Pastor Green is running a little bit late. So we have our hangout squad tonight. There'll be no Jamal because Jamal is not feeling well. He's still hurting with the sciatica. Just continue to keep him in prayer, and he might jump on, but keep Jamal in prayer. All right, let's go ahead and get our panel on for tonight. And we have another young gentleman by the name of Paul Richards. And we're glad to have him here with us tonight from Are You Saved Ministries. And of course, Pastor Samuel is with us tonight. So we're going to be getting into this discussion. Let's go ahead and bow our heads for a word of prayer. Father God, I am so glad to be here. And I am praying that everyone who's with us are glad as well. And I'm asking, oh Father, that your Holy Spirit will move upon us this evening as we spread your word and your gospel through media. At the same time, talk about the things that are about to come and that we should be preparing for. Get our hearts and our minds ready. Even now, we ask, Lord, and forgive us for any mistakes that we have made. And as the sun has set, Lord Jesus, we just ask that our hearts are prepared for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Amen.
All right. All right. So, yeah, brothers, as you saw in the trailer, there was a lot that was said. I think what I want to do, I just want to kick it right off because there's a lot to talk about in this situation here. So let me go ahead and get my presentation back up and going, and we'll take it from there. Oh, I don't need that. Oh, where did it go? Hold on a second. There he goes. All right. Let's go ahead and jump right into it because there's a lot to talk about this evening. So, first things first, here's what we're looking at. There are a lot of communities who are looking for a Sabbath in America. That's first things first. And what they're calling it is a non-commerce day. I want you guys to see where this is going because they're not going to call it a Sunday law. Okay? They're not doing that. They're looking for now also an ecological. This is what Rome is looking for, an ecological Sunday ban. So you have on both ends of the spectrum, one is calling it we need to stop commerce, and Rome is calling it ecological for climate change purposes. Okay? All right. The next is we can see that this was Pope Francis and even Pope Leo is echoing the same type of rhetoric. The world needs to reject nationalism and adapt concrete political changes in response to climate change. Now, both popes, the dead one and the live one today, are saying the same thing. Okay? Nothing has changed with them. From a Protestant position, they're looking at from as we need to stop commerce. Now, the thing about it is Rome is saying the same thing about commerce as well. Let's stop commerce. So both of them agree on the commerce, while yet they may have differences on climate change. But the point is that they are agreeing. Catholics argue that the blue laws established by the Protestants now are good for reviving church attendance and providing a greater good for society. That sounds like the common good. So Catholics now are saying, hey, what the Protestants are pushing for sounds good. We're on the right track with the blue laws, and you're going to be hearing about that tonight. We're going to be talking about that as well tonight. Here it is. Now, here is where the rubber meets the road. A poll was taken. What is your stance on the blue laws? 55% of Americans say keep them. 55%. That's a little more than half of the country that says keep them. Brothers and sisters, there's a Sunday law coming. There's a Sunday law coming. Now, we know it as a Sunday law, but you're going to hear tonight that there are some that don't understand this whole Sunday law thing. Why are we calling it a Sunday law? It's not real legislation, is it? But then again, it is legislation. But then again, why do we want to call it a Sunday law? While they're calling it a non-commerce day, a day where Sunday is looked upon a day that people's stores are closed. So they want to bring the blue laws back, but the blue laws are already here. It's already in progress in many states still to this day. So what is it that they're trying to do? What is it that they're pushing for, if not something called a Sunday law? Gentlemen, let's get some of your thoughts here before we move on.
Yeah,
Pastor,
we know that.
Oh no, yeah, we know that the rumblings for the National Sunday Law, that there are so many issues in society, and everything that we see taking place with the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, especially as what we read in Revelation 13, it's as a means to counteract a lot of the social and economic and political issues that are taking place. And so, even from an ecology standpoint, it is a fact that the ecological state of the planet is in shambles. Even Hosea chapter 4 talks about that as a result of the sins of man, that the very animal creation is groaning for deliverance. And unfortunately, as a result of that movement being co opted by nefarious actors, it has even been lost upon our minds as Christians the obligation that we have to take care of the planet, because that is something that God taxed us as human beings to do. We see that directive in the book of Genesis. But we do know that Satan is going to use the movement in order to bring about a lot of these things that we see taking place, especially as it relates to the National Sunday Law. But yeah, all of this is a fulfillment of what we see in Revelation 13.
Brother Paul.
Yeah. I was looking at, you mentioned the ecological thing that the Pope has been talking about. And I think some people forgot about it, but I did not. I remember this whole thing with Greta Thunberg supposedly going around the world a couple of years back and pushing for this ecological reform in the world, and I didn't forget that that was a movement, and it seems that from what we're seeing, it seems that these things are continually going through, and it's almost like it went from. I remember when Pope Francis was pushing that, and he was supporting this movement with Greta Thunberg, talking about ecological from an ecological standpoint, that the world needs a rest and that there's a change, and so the world needs a rest, and I'm assuming that they're going to say that that rest should be on Sunday. As a matter of fact, two encyclicals say that already. So we see that these rumblings are happening behind the scenes, and even in the forefront, if you're following current events. But we see that now it's coming right here to the United States, and I believe that the movement behind that is coming from the Vatican, but we just are not seeing that in its totality just yet.
All right. Well, Pastor Green is here.
Happy Sabbath, everybody.
And I want to get Pastor Green up to speed as to what it is that we're talking about. So, Pastor Green, a couple things happening. You know, we know that the encyclical of Pope Leo went out on Memorial Day. There are a lot of rumblings going on with this Sunday rest, right? What took place on May 27th, May 17th, excuse me, is now pushing. It started the snowball effect of people starting to question whether or not Sunday rest should be a legal thing, right? Let this thing be done legally, so that way we can, pause on the commerce, right? We can have everyone relax themselves on Sunday, because Sunday is the day of rest, as what they call it. But I'm going to share with you some things, and I'm going to kind of bring you back into the fold in a second. I'm going to share with you a video by Glenn Beck. You guys know who Glenn Beck is, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Glenn Beck?
Yes.
Pastor Green?
I'm not altogether sure.
Not altogether sure. If you see his face, you might know who he is, or you might hear his voice or something like that. But let me go ahead and do that, and then I will come back to getting your thoughts, Pastor Green, on.
Well, I was just listening to Paul talking about Greta Thunberg.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the Roman Catholic Church, particularly, the Roman Catholic Church, they always get young people involved in a movement. If they can brainwash the younger generation, then they'll have a force later on to push their agenda. And that young lady have no idea, what she's been put up to. And she's been, more or less used as a means to an end, and pushing something that really have implications that is far greater than. She think that she's doing something good, and a lot of these young people that they use, this Roman Catholic Church, gotta have a lot of nerve, to use young people for some dastardly deed that they're pushing, and this economic. Ecological, yeah. This whole thing is just that, we can see it because we've been studying this movement, but these young people, they're just now getting on board and they have no idea what they're getting behind.
Yeah, this blue law issue is the conversation now. But I'm gonna share with you something from Glenn Beck, and I want you guys to tell me what your thoughts are when you hear what he says.
I don't want to take up too much time because I know you have to do this, but is there an increased significance in your mind when it comes to what's going on in the world, when it comes to what's going on in Israel? Because this was started before any of this stuff started happening on October 7th, for sure.
Nobody knows the time, we're all told. But if you're a Christian and you haven't at least thought that maybe there's a lot of prophecy being fulfilled here, maybe this is the time. I talked to Pat earlier this morning, and he said, I always thought it would be more obvious if this is the time. The mark of the beast. Is that CBDC? I don't know. What is it? It could be anything. And he said, I always thought it would be more clear, but it's not. Maybe it becomes more clear, but you can tell the difference between good and evil. Most people can still do that, although many, listen to hour one of this broadcast, many cannot.
Seen that, you heard that. Thoughts? Pastor Green, I'll let you go first.
People need to study. People need to study. The people that's on the top of the pyramid and that's pushing these things. I never knew that there was such division, even amongst the Jewish people, and who the groups, the main group that's being supported, by the Roman Catholic Church, and they're like hand in glove, and that's the Ashkenazi Jews working along with the Roman Catholic Church, and you got about 60 visions among those Jews, and I'm telling you, some of the things that they have done, like a group of the Jews known as the Beta Jews, they're the lowest on the totem pole. And they have been actually genocide out of existence. So if they would come up with means to genocide out of existence people that are related to them, but these are the darker complexion Jews, that have migrated over there to Israel, and they've given some kind of contraceptive, that operate, on a 3-year basis of causing the women to be infertile, in order for them not to have competition with intermarriage. There's some really devious, nasty, dirty things that have been perpetrated against, even among the Jews themselves. And so that is being carried out on a global basis, through the Roman Catholic Church and the need to establish themselves over there in Israel, with the building of the temple. And I'm telling you, there's no, in the United States, for the United States to be going along with the Roman Catholic Church and the Ashkenazi Jews, that's really, the American people and people in general have no idea how how
Dangerous.
devious and dangerous this is, because you're talking about, genociding people out of existence.
Yeah, there's so much to masticate on in reference to what Glenn Beck is saying.
Is he? Do you have any idea what Glenn Beck is? He one of the astronauts?
He's not a Jew.
Oh, he's not.
No, he's not.
Is he Roman Catholic?
He's not a Catholic either. He's not a Seventh-day Adventist either. So that's not what he is. He is, I believe, either non-denominational or
He's
a Baptist. What is it?
he's Mormon.
He's Mormon. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Mormons are tied in with the Roman Catholic Church. That whole agenda.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I mean, from a top level, but I don't know for sure if he is tied in with the Roman Catholic Church at all. But maybe from a top level, that is something that we have discussed before. But Glenn Beck, just to give you a little bit history on Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is one of those guys that he's a well-studied guy. One of the ones that had gotten some great controversy books, read the book. He read the entire book, brought it to his station, to his radio station, to his TV station, and started to distribute the books. The Great Controversy. So he's one of those kind of guys that he's like a Tucker Carlson. He's well studied, right? He's a well studied guy. Sam Tucker, Pastor Tucker.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Pastor Green was mentioning, that unfortunately, Glenn Beck, as is mentioned, Glenn Beck is Mormon. And unfortunately, because of Glenn Beck's political persuasions, for a very long period of time, he has been unfortunately negatively influenced by U.S. Foreign and domestic policy. And so he certainly would be categorized as a right-wing activist or right-wing political pundit. And as a result of his decades, again, in the political sphere, it's very difficult for him to see Bible prophecy for what it is. Because as you mentioned, he received a lot of great controversies. I'm pretty sure some of the viewers saw, this was several years ago, maybe about 10 years ago now, where he had the CEO of Remnant Publications on his platform. And he was mentioning that he personally had received roughly about 500 to 600 copies of the Great Controversy easily. And so he's certainly acquainted with some principles in the Great Controversy. But again, because Glenn Beck is constantly associated with all the warmongers, with all the Christian Zionists that are in Congress, that are in the executive branch of the government, and just in U.S. government in general, it becomes very difficult to see the truth for what it really is. And so it's very similar to Nicodemus. So Nicodemus, he had a desire to know the truth. He had a desire to accept Christ as the Messiah, but because he was in the Sanhedrin, because he was constantly surrounded with all of that perversion of Bible prophecy, it was very difficult for Nicodemus to actually understand the true purpose of the Messiah. And he only came to a proper understanding of those things once Jesus died upon the cross of Calvary. So persons like Glenn Beck are really going to have to see a lot of these things that we see in those closing chapters of Revelation, the things that we see in those closing chapters of Great Controversy. A lot of these things are going to have to take place before their eyes in order for them to be properly awakened from the spiritual miasma, the darkness that is constantly surrounding their minds. Because again, and there's a friend of mine, and he mentions this a lot, that the church, especially the evangelical church, sounds no different than the Pentagon. And unfortunately, especially with the evangelicals in the United States supporting the state of Israel, they heavily believe that everything that is taking place is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Again, the genocide taking place in Palestine, Gaza, that all of these things have great prophetic significance. But again, we know it is a gross distortion of the scriptures. And a simple understanding of Daniel chapter 9 would very clearly refute those teachings. And mind you, in Daniel chapter 9, for those of our audience that are not familiar, Daniel chapter 9 is the specific prophecy, the 70-week prophecy, which is the first part of the 2300-day prophecy spoken of in Daniel chapter 8. That part of the prophecy clearly outlined that if certain specifications were not meted out by the Jewish people, that they would cease to be God's chosen people. And this was not an Adventist position that was brought into existence merely after the passing of the time of 1844. But when you go and look at the history, there were many a Protestant historian that understood these teachings of Daniel chapter 9 and taught these things. But sadly, these things have been lost, especially upon this generation.
I agree. You know, one of the things that really gets me, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, that the first phase of the 2300-year prophecy as the reformers understood it, you know, in Daniel chapter 8, that has been lost. It has totally been lost. And the thing that really gets me is that when it comes to understanding things, people cannot see the bigger picture because they fail to study what the reformers, what they were fighting. If they would go back to studying Luther and Calvin and John Wesley, all of them identified the Antichrist system. But because we stopped studying and the nominal churches stopped studying, they're totally in league with the papacy that have put out false information during the counter-Catholic Reformation following the attempt by Martin Luther to enlighten the world about this Antichrist system. And even people like Candace Owens. I mean, I used to be a fan of Candace Owens because she's very, very intelligent. But yet and still, I don't understand how she can be fighting against the Astronaski segment of the Jewish people that's in collusion with the Roman Catholic Church. I don't think that she have any idea the danger that she's putting herself in by fighting against these particular Jews, Netanyahu, and that whole crowd, and being in the belly of the beast with the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, I believe her husband is a high-ranking Roman Catholic. She has no idea the danger she has put herself in.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of folks have the idea of the dangers that they're in and we're in. Paul, what are your thoughts on what you heard in that video as well?
Yeah, I was listening to you guys all brought up the points about the great controversy. I recall when he was talking about that, and had that interview with, and I was like, man, this guy's getting the scriptures, he's getting the word, and he said he read the great controversy, and he said that he believed what was in the great controversy, yet he made a statement like he just made, which goes to show when you're in places of power, places of influence, that you have that you're going to experience some issues when it comes to what you bring forth publicly. So if he said he read the great controversy, and according to what Brother Samuel shared, Pastor Samuel shared, he received at least about 500 of them.
Yeah.
And he talked about distributing them, and he said he believed what was in it, but then he's speaking differently. And I don't blame him, because I think that he still needs to understand Bible truth, but knowing what people from Mormons believe, he has to make a decision. Is he going to believe the truth, or is he going to go with what the public is saying, go with what's popular is saying? Popular is being said, or even in his own church as a Mormon, is he going to believe Mormonism in opposed to what the Bible says? I mean, we have these different school of thought in terms of prophecy. I mean, the right way we believe is to see prophecy from a historical standpoint. But some of these pundits, some of these scholars, if they start looking at things as a futurist way, then or as a preterist way, it gets confusing understanding Bible prophecy. Yet they are seeing it directly in front of their faces, and everybody's trying to point back to the true followers of God being the Jews, or I should say the so-called Jews. But if the truth be told, if they study the scripture and not study what's being shared, or study what the so-called fathers are bringing, then they would understand. But this is our job, and I believe that our dear brother and people like Tucker Carlson and the brother who lost his life had these opportunities to interact with Seventh-day Adventists, and even Mr. Trump has someone sitting in his cabinet who is a Seventh-day Adventist, and they have these opportunities, and we as that are in those positions, some are sharing and some are not. But I believe, just like we saw with Nebuchadnezzar and others, that we're seeing that these brothers that are in high position, that are in high public position, are getting an opportunity to hear the straight testimony of the straight truth.
Right. You know, just touching up again a little bit on Glenn Beck. I can glean a couple things from that. He's in media, right? He's in media. There's a few things that he said that I think we should kind of open up, right? One of the things that he said was, when he spoke to his friend told him he thought that the mark of the beast would be a little more clearer, something that is like pops out, something that you can say, you know what, that's it. But he's saying, I don't know what it is now. I really don't understand what it is. To me, there is an opportunity to share with this brother, being that, I don't know, God has a way of working on people's hearts, right? There are going to be a lot of surprises in heaven, a lot of surprises. And when you see somebody like a Glenn Beck on the radio, because he has a radio show that is syndicated, when he's speaking this way, as to say, we are living in the last days and we are seeing the prophecy being fulfilled. This is what he said. I'm not going by the fact that he's a political pundit and all this other stuff. There are times the rocks start to say things not knowing that they're being used to say something that is poignant at that moment. And I believe it is pertinent for us to say, you know what? If the rock is speaking, then we need to start speaking a little bit louder and a little bit more, because he has a platform, and that platform carries millions of people. And he's saying, we are living in the last days. We are seeing the signs being fulfilled. We're seeing prophecy being fulfilled all around us. And then when he brings up the mark of the beast, he's not bringing it up. He's like, I don't know. Is it CBDC? Is it something? What is it? And this is the time when we can share what it is with a Glenn Beck.
I believe that leadership, even among the Roman Catholic Church, they are in agreement. I'm talking about the top brass in the Roman Catholic Church. They will boldly tell folks, that if any church have a good understanding of prophecy, it's the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They know that we, have the heartbeat of prophecy. They understand that. But it seems like they are set on, a particular track, and they're not going to deviate from that track. But this Glenn Beck, somebody need to sit down with him and start from the very basis. They need to go through the various the chapters in the book of Daniel, with the four world kingdoms and so forth, and the little horn that evolved into the Roman Catholic Church, and out of the Roman Catholic Church evolved the papal system. When the Roman Catholic Church broke up in 476 BC AD, and that particular power, took over there in Europe. I mean, to me, it is very clear, and for this guy to have studied the Great Controversy. The Great Controversy makes all of that very, very clear. If he studied the last 6 chapters in the Great Controversy, he would understand very clearly who the Antichrist system is. So it makes me wonder, about Glenn Beck. Maybe being that he's just now getting into studying seriously about prophecy. Maybe he's a little bit confused, but it's very clear in my mind who the beast system is. And I don't know, when I think about the Mormon Church and the Roman Catholic Church, that temple that the Mormons have over there in Salt Lake City. I mean, it's very clear to me that they're tied in with secret organizations because they got symbolism all over that temple.
Yeah, they do.
They got symbolism, and not only that, but even the Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses became an official religion in 1881, 1 year after the Jesuits, Hort and Westcott, came up with the critical text, which became a rival Greek text to the King James. The Mormons, the Westcott and Hort, they were Oxford so-called scholars, but they were Jesuits, and they came up with a rival Greek text to the King James, and so Russell and Rutherford. I mean, it's a known fact that they were 32nd or 33rd degree Freemasons. Even the monument that represents Russell is in the shape of the Great Pyramid. I mean, those folks are steeped in Catholicism, secret organizations. They all are tied in, and so are the leaders in the Mormon Church. All of those organizations came into existence right around the time of Westcott and Hort. They came around because 1881, the Adventist Church, we used to be very closely associated with, except for we deviated, or they deviated because of Arianism. They had a different concept of who Jesus Christ was. And I believe that there may have been some insiders within the Adventist Church that caused them to veer off in another direction, and became that caused the organization to split and begin to see things in a different light. But there's a lot of things, that the Roman Catholic Church, even Westcott and Hort, if you read their 5 books that they're writing, you would find out that they were talking about the New World Order all the way back in the mid-1800s. They talked about the New World Order. And that's why when the Jehovah's Witnesses came into existence, their book is entitled The New World's Translation, because they highly revere Westcott and Hort. Even in their Bible, on the first introductory pages, it says, based on the scholarship of Westcott and Hort in the Jehovah's Witness Bible.
So are we saying that based upon his religion and his background, that what he's saying does not have any validity? Is that what we have?
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead.
I would have to say that, you can be in the belly of the beast, and you can be so brainwashed that you really believe in the system. It's almost like my brother is a Jehovah's Witness, and that's one subject that we try to stay away from, because when I get into prophetic conversation with my brother, he is so rooted in Jehovah's Witness, take on, the mark of the beast and all of that, because they feel like the mark of the beast is United Nations. Well, the United Nations, it plays into it, but you got to keep in mind that who sits on top of the United Nations? Who is the chairman? Who has spearheaded that whole movement? It's the Roman Catholic Church. They have an idea, but they don't go deep enough and they don't go far enough. And so when people have been brainwashed by the organization, it's hard to get them to see your point of view, and they want to argue down to the core with you instead of stopping and listening to what you have to say.
Yeah, I would just say, just to piggyback off of what Pastor Green was mentioning, that especially when you're talking about someone like Glenn Beck, and his experience is really just indicative of where a lot of people are. So again,
Mhm.
using the example of Nicodemus, so Nicodemus was, I'm sure, was praying for the Messiah. He was not a hypocrite, but unfortunately, as a result of the system that he was immersed in, he could not see things clearly. And the counsel that Jesus gave to Nicodemus is really telling. So he comes to Jesus and says that, we know that you must be a rabbi sent from God, because nobody who's not from God could be doing the things that you're doing. And Jesus responds by communicating to him that he's not converted, that he needs to be born again. And
Well,
this really,
yeah, I just
and
want to
this,
say, what you said, my brother, is is almost correct. But the thing is, he didn't say, "I know that you are a man sent from God," but he said, "We know." In other words, they had been discussing him. He made it very clear that they had been discussing him, and they all came to the conclusion that he wasn't just an ordinary man because of the things that he had done. So they had been discussing. They knew exactly who Jesus was, because he didn't say, "I know that you are a man sent from God," but he said, "We know." The Sanhedrin Council.
So
yes.
again, that's to my
Well,
point. My point I'm trying to make
is
is
it okay
this.
if I just finish
Get
the
finish your
point?
thought there, bro. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. So he mentioned to Nicodemus that he needed to be born again, and
Hmm.
so even when you look at the great controversy does not start out with talking about the papacy and liberty of conscience threatened and the impending conflict and the loud cry and all those things. It starts with the experience of the reformers and the process of conversion that all of them had to go through. And this is really the emphasis that is lost on the minds of a lot of persons, because part of the reason, really the fundamental reason why the reformers were able to identify Roman Catholicism as the Antichrist was the experience of Christian conversion that they went through, because Protestantism is not merely a protest against Roman Catholicism, but it is a protest against any person or system that is infringing upon persons' ability to be able to exercise the freedom of their own conscience, thus in turn worshiping God according to the dictates of that said conscience. And this is even to a broader point. Even the Roman Catholic Church, as has been mentioned, it is true that they have an understanding of the fact that we as Seventh-day Adventists teach certain things. And mind you, essentially every time now that there's something taking place at DC or major events, there's lots of great controversies that are distributed and all of these things ad nauseum. But in principle, one would even dare say that these things are not really feared, because in principle, as we know from Matthew 24, that the Bible says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And so there is a demonstration of Adventism, and that needs to take place. And that's really what Satan is afraid of. And that's really what Glenn Beck is waiting for. That's really what all of these people, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and all these things, though they may not communicate it openly, intrinsically, this is what the world is waiting for, is for this demonstration, because it's not merely identifying Rome as the Antichrist, because we know there are other Christian denominations that believe that the Pope is the Antichrist. So it's not merely the identification of these things, but it's what Adventism is supposed to produce practically that will convince people of the reality of the true gospel and what this is to do in the lives of individuals. And so, in turn, this is what these persons are waiting for. And mind you, what is the benefit of communicating to Glenn Beck or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, the world at large, that the Pope is the Antichrist, but yet we're not giving them a demonstration of what the gospel is supposed to do in our lives if we're just merely identifying that which is bad?
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah. Just briefly, I thought that I agree with the points that you guys brought up. I looked up John chapter 3 where Nicodemus comes to Jesus, My concern is similar to what um, Pastor Tucker mentioned, is that we see these things happening, and it's it's almost like we're waiting for the who was it? Pastor Skeet in a sermon mentioned this one time, and I remember distinctly that we're taking out our binoculars and we say, okay, there's the Pope. Look what he's doing over there, or we look and see what others are doing. But there's a gospel that needs to be shared, and I think there's a lot of us um, that are going. I remember I was watching. Pastor Tucker, he went and was in Washington sharing with some, and he even spoke to some said Christian nationalists. And, we need to be on the ground because we see all of these things happening. And I thank God for ministries like Mount Carmel Ministry and Glad Tidings and other people and the pastors that are preaching. We need to get on the ground and do this work because our neighbors have these thoughts. I mean, yes, there are Tucker Carlsons, the Glenn Becks, and others, but there are our next door neighbors are the ones listening to these people. What are we going to share with them? We have a groundwork to do. We have to be on the ground. I mean, yes, I'm going to be going to church tomorrow, and most of us will be going to church on Sabbath. But are we seeing that we're a movement, we're an army that needs to go out and be the hands, the feet, and the mouthpiece and share this gospel? We don't need to wait for our pastor to do it. We don't need to wait for the online ministries to do it. We ourselves can be on the ground spreading the gospel. I mean, when I say spreading the gospel, not just handing out books. I'm talking about sitting with your neighbors, having Bible studies, because your next door neighbors, your coworkers, they all, a lot of them are very, very patriotic. And if they're being patriotic, they also, a lot of them, they're being aligned to think with this whole nationalistic way of thinking. And so the enemy is doing a work out there now, but it's time for us to get out and do this work. And we have these opportunities. Let's take advantage. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to give out 2,000 great controversy. You can give out one and do one Bible study with a family.
Amen.
And that's a great work.
Yeah. Paul, I think you're absolutely right. And if we all, became an army of one and everybody got out there on the beat and we began to talk to people, we could definitely make a difference. But when it comes to on a mass scale, the Roman Catholic Church, controls the media. And it's only by the grace of God that our little media here and other people that have other podcasts are able to get information out. But we are insignificant as far as the mass media is concerned. There are people that have lost their lives trying to get control of the major media industries like CBS and NBC. Like Bill Cosby and Prince and people like that. They have the money, but they forfeited their lives and got put in prison when they attempt to get control of the media. If our church was able to get control of the mass media, I mean, it would come under the ire of the dragon. But the only way that we can do it, Paul, is one-on-one. Everybody. You can't stop a media if you have a million people and everybody is out there on the street and they're doing work individually. You couldn't stop that. There's no way you could stop it.
Yeah, the thing is, when does that work begin? Does that work begin tomorrow? Does that work begin now? I mean, we've been preaching this from, I don't know how long we've been preaching this, right? That we have a work to do. I've always said there is a sign in heaven that says wanted, workers wanted, needed, right? We're hiring. Jesus has been hiring for many, many years now, right? The field that he has for work it's a vast field. We need more workers. We need more hands. Not only that though, but at the same time, I'm going to move on from this because there's more to talk about. But at the same time, we have to be able to know how to reach out to those who are asking questions. I don't care whether they are, whatever secret society they may be in. I don't care, right? Because they are souls to be won. They're not lost, right?
They're on the wrong track.
They may be on the wrong track, but they're not lost. Here's, again, heaven's going to be one vast surprise. Because the thing about it is that work that Christ has begun, he will finish it. And he's begun that work in everyone who's been calling out on his name. So he's going to finish that work. The thing is, we don't know who Christ is working on. We don't know. And all I'm saying is when people have questions, these are the times. Even what you just said, Paul, if your neighbor has questions, you go to your neighbor and you start giving them Bible studies. They're no different from anybody else. We're no different from anybody else, right? So this is the time that we ought to start this cry. Whatever it is, right. The cry has already begun. It's going to get loud without us, whether we want it or not, right? So this is the time. This is the time. Now I'm going to move on to the next segment here because that was just a teaser as to what Glenn Beck is saying. Hey, listen, the prophecies are being fulfilled. The mere fact that he says that should trigger us now to go, you know what? Yeah, we need to start opening up our mouths more. Because if somebody like him is saying it, then what are we if we're not saying it, right? Two things are true at the same time. What is the gospel in verity? Does anybody know what the gospel is in verity? Sister White says that the three angels' message is the gospel in verity, meaning it's the gospel in full. The three angels' message, the third angel's message is the gospel in full. It's the gospel in verity. That alone, you can peel back the onions and distribute the gospel utilizing the three angels' messages.
Yes, sir.
If we don't know how to do that, then there's something wrong with what we've learned as what the gospel truly is. Okay? The three angels' messages is the gospel in verity, meaning that it is the gospel in full. So we should be able to utilize that message to give the gospel of Christ at the same time that warning message is all in there at the same time. There should be no distinction, no divide, no nothing. All of it is packaged as one full package.
But you got to understand history, because even as you said that the gospel in verity is the three angels' message, when you peel back the layers of that onion, you get to the core of the onion eventually. But how can you break it down if you don't know history?
No, you have to know. Yeah, I'm all for the history. I believe the third angel's message provides that history. Number one, the first angel's messages point you back to the Garden of Eden. It points you back to everything from the beginning. So that's history right there. You can, the first angel's message is giving you the history, right? Worship God, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Boom. Let's get back to that now. Let's go back to Genesis and see how that works out, how that plays out. So we're going into history. Biblical history should provide us all that we need to this point.
Secular
I'm
history too,
history.
not just biblical history, but secular history.
I'm talking about secular history. I'm saying biblical history should be able to engulf all of that
absolutely
at one time to this point, to where we are right now. So secular history and biblical history should go hand in hand. We can look at the 2300-day prophecy and know secular history has been fulfilled in that biblical history.
You know, and just like when you're studying Daniel and Revelation, you start with Daniel, and then you go to Daniel 2, then you go to 7, then you go to 8, then you go to 10, then you go to 11, and then you go to 12. That's how it is when you're studying, because you get a full picture of what's going on through the first angel's message, and you come to understand the importance of the Sabbath because it breaks it down. It says why we ought to recognize God as the creator, as worship worthy is because he is the creator. And then you go to the second angel's message and the third angel's message. And by the time you get to the third angel's message, you come to realize that unless we preach this message and prepare people, we are in trouble.
Right. All right. So let me go ahead, Tucker. I'm Pastor Tucker. I'm going to transition.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, yeah. Just piggybacking off of what you all were saying, that this is really the difficulty with where we see a lot of emphasis on Bible prophecy, especially Revelation 13. And I'm pretty sure for a lot of our viewers that listen to a lot of ministers online and things to that nature, because of the hyper emphasis on this segment of Bible prophecy, it's really distorted in a lot of people's minds what the Adventist message is. So, Adventism did not come into existence as a result of the pioneers preaching the National Sunday Law. The Adventist Church did not come into existence as a result of emphasizing the influence of the Roman Catholic Church and then eventually apostate Protestantism. All of that was merely a byproduct of them understanding the gospel in the context of Jesus moving from the holy to the most holy place on October 22nd, 1844. And again, when you take the concept of Protestantism, and Protestantism is just merely revived Christianity, it is the gospel of Jesus Christ, as Romans emphasizes. It's the power of God unto salvation. So it's God's work to reform us back into the image of God. And any satanic influence, whether by person, nation, corporation, or entity of any sort, to hinder what God is trying to do in the hearts and minds of individuals, that is vehemently protested against. Because again, perfect example, Great Controversy, chapter 1, dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem. We can think about that man who was going up all down in the city and preaching of the coming calamity. And unfortunately, because of his misunderstanding of the gospel himself, he died in the very siege that he was predicting. And so, especially when we're thinking about the Adventist message, when we're thinking about proclaiming this, it's packaging the gospel in this particular context. And while, yes, it is a protest against Rome, it's a protest against apostate Protestantism, but we're seeking to bring people into an understanding of Christ in a fuller context that has ever been given in the history of humanity. So when we're told, for instance, in volume 5 and of the testimonies in volume 7, that the greatest wealth of truth ever entrusted to mortals, the most solemn and fearful warnings ever sent by God to man, have been given to us as Seventh-day Adventists, those fearful warnings are not merely a protest against Rome, because the Protestant reformers were preaching against Rome. So the question has to be asked again by default: what's the difference between what we're preaching and what the reformers are preaching? And the difference is we have a fuller understanding of what the gospel is, so much to the point that if a person accepts the gospel in the context of the third angel's message, their Christian character will not merely begin. Their Christian experience will not merely begin in conversion, but it will be brought all the way unto perfection, to the point that we see in Revelation 14:12, where God will be able to say, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus." And Adventist evangelism, in its full context, again, what we read in the testimonies, is to produce this spiritual experience in the people. Because even when you're reading Great Controversy, not to belabor the point, we're told that when probation has closed, after the loud cry is given and all these things, that we as God's people, our burden of conscience is not going to be the persecution of the papacy. It's not going to be the persecution of apostate Protestantism. Our greatest anxiety, the question is going to be, have all of our sins been blotted out in the heavenly sanctuary? The greatest burden is going to be in context of us living in this time of judgment. Have we received the gospel enough that this Christian experience that we have started has been brought to proper completion?
And I think that's a very good question as we look to segue, because I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that really quickly because I think what we're about to take a look at should lead us to that discussion. All right. Now, per our, I should say our thumbnail, we talked about a gentleman named Stephen Wolfe. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Stephen Wolfe. Pastor Green, have you heard of this gentleman?
I have, yeah.
Okay,
I've heard
perfect.
of him, but I haven't been studying him religiously.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at what took place, I think like almost a week or two ago in Collegedale, where our brothers from Heritage had an interview.
Guy's smart.
With him. Okay. And I think based upon a lot of the things that he said, now, this was a 2-hour interview, and I don't want to belabor with a bunch of clips. I just took the ones that I thought was most important to have a discussion on. But I think what we can really glean from is what he was saying and how he said it, to garner some information as to what the plans are, right? So let's take a look at this first clip here, and we'll go from here. Some of y'all may have seen this on Dr. O's channel a couple of days ago.
The first law that our country should bring back at the county or state levels should be a Sunday blue law.
Wow.
And that should be to restrict ordinary commerce so that people would be encouraged to attend church.
All right.
Oh, Stephen Wolfe. Maybe I'm getting him mixed up with somebody else, but I thought he was somebody else that you're referring to.
Okay. Now, this is pretty much the language being used. The first law that they should pass. Why would it be the first law? Because somebody asked him, should there be a religious law? And his idea is that yes, there should be a religious law, and the first one that they should pass should be the one that ends commerce and points people back to going to church. Okay, we can see that that there is a push for Sunday law, but you will also hear in his take that there also is a push for a no buy, no sell. And I wonder in my mind if he realizes what the Bible really says, in reference to what he's pushing, Paul.
Yeah, I was just looking at this. One thing I didn't, what was going through my head is some of these guys are being misguided. I wonder if you really bring Bible truth to them, if they would change their thinking, or if they are plants. I don't know which. I don't know how to really address that. But I will say, according to what he's saying, this is gonna push us. This is gonna push the United States into. There's already people pushing for blue laws throughout in the different states, and everybody is because of the whole push that we've seen with secularism and different lifestyles being promoted over the last couple of years. A lot of people are going to the right, and they're tired of seeing all of this nonsense, immorality taking place, and they're using this push as the mechanism to try to legislate or try to make the United States moral again, or I'm trying to make the United States moral. I don't know that we were ever in a moral state, but we need to. If this gets, I looked at what E.J. Wagner and what's the other guy's name, A.T. Jones, and what they did when these things were being pushed back in 1888, 1889, 1890s, and they were standing, and they had the opportunity to stand. We have that opportunity now too. We're doing it right now. Right now in this podcast, this is going forward. There are people 300 people listening, and others are going to listen going forward. This word is getting out, but will these guys see this type of? I see that some of these guys as Nicodemuses. I think people like this Stephen Wolfe. I see him like a Nicodemus, where he's going the way of the nationalistic way of thinking,
Hmm.
and he just needs some guidance. I wonder if there has to be somebody close by him that can give him some guidance, and maybe maybe his way of thinking can be turned. I don't know. I don't know. That's the first. That was just the first thing that went through my head. Can men like this, or people thinking like this, if they hear the straight test, if they hear the truth, if they hear the present truth, they hear the real Bible truth, if they would be, if they'll get the opportunity to make
To
a
be converted.
change. I think to get converted.
I think the agenda was already laid out, in 2015 with Laudato Si, when the Roman Catholic Church laid out their agenda, and they made it very clear, that they're going to use the environment, in order to push this agenda, but also from a religious point of view. It brings in, bringing under control, the moral degradation and all of that. But the main thing is pushing, the agenda that was laid out by the papacy is they're going to use force. And they're saying that all businesses, everybody got to get on board in order to save the earth. In other words, all of this madness that's going on, a lot of people don't focus on weather modification. But I mean, if you go back into history, go back to Geneva Convention in 1970, when former President Nixon, they were passing legislation over in Geneva, France, about the use of weather modification, that you can use it domestically, but you cannot use it as a weapon against another nation. But you got to keep in mind that the Roman Catholic Church controls every nation under the globe. And so they can all do it domestically, because most of the nations are controlled by Rome, to make it appear as if this is a global thing. But then you got a power that have tentacles that operate through all of these organizations, creating the narrative and the need for nations coming together in order to stop this global madness that's going on. And people can't see this octopus for what it is. It controls the United States. It definitely have control of the United States, but it's touching all of these other nations. But finally, they got control of the United States. And we know that this country is going to be the police power that is going to force all of these other nations into submission to go along with this agenda of the Roman Catholic Church. The sign of their authority is Sunday. And they want to make it very clear that they're in opposition against the divine word of God. They're in opposition against God. We're going to establish our sign over and against what God established.
Yeah, and even just piggyback. I'm sorry, not to cut. Especially with Brother Wolf, for our audience, it's really beneficial to understand where people who consider themselves Christian nationalists, where they get their ethos from. So, Christian nationalism is merely a revival of Puritanism. Now, again, for our audience who may not be familiar with the Puritans, so this was essentially the religious demographic that came over to the United States. I'm pretty sure we're at least to some degree all familiar with the landing on Plymouth Rock in 1620 and so on and so forth. But the Puritans, and this is so eloquently stated in books like Ecclesiastical Empire by A.T. Jones, where he talks about how when the Puritans came over to the New World, it's true that to a strong degree that they were seeking to escape religious persecution, but they came over to the quote unquote New World in order to establish an unabridged Puritan theocracy. Now, the Puritans got their religious ethos from a gentleman named John Calvin. Now, even though John Calvin was a mighty reformer whom God used, he did not understand the principle of religious liberty. So even though he renounced many of the tenets of Roman Catholicism, he practiced religious draconianism when he was governing Geneva. And that religious framework is what the Puritans brought over here to the so-called New World. And Christian nationalists are merely reviving this idea. And mind you, Christian nationalism is not merely a religious persuasion, but it's heavily embedded in an ethnocentric ideology. So the Puritans, they believed that they were the children of Israel, antitypically, prophetically, coming over to the promised land, which they consider North America. And so everyone else, the indigenous, eventually the black Africans, the even the poor white from over from Western Europe, they consider these groups, especially the indigenous and the Negro, they consider these groups as being the Canaanites that needed to be driven from the land. So as a result of that, they greatly persecuted the Native Americans and so on and so forth. So this was the religious persuasion that the Puritans had, and Christian nationalists greatly espouse these viewpoints. So to give another example, it's like the Jews. So besides them having all of their religious prejudices, they had a lot of ethnic prejudices as well. And this poison was so embedded into their psyche that even after Jesus died on the cross and resurrected, in Acts chapter 1, the apostles were still asking Christ, was he at this time to restore the kingdom unto Israel? So just explaining all of this to just allow our listeners to understand that when these types of errors are so embedded in the psyche, it really takes heavy drafts of the Holy Spirit in order to uproot these things. And this is why we're told in Great Controversy that this loud cry is not going to be carried so much as by argument, but as by the deep conviction of the Spirit of God. And so men like Brother Wolfe and others, many of them mean well, but because they have been swimming in this psychological poison for so long, it is really going to take this Christ-like practical demonstration and the heavy conviction of the Holy Spirit in order to uproot the errors that they have been espousing for so long.
And I believe that, as you mentioned earlier, that, you know, just because these people may be rooted in some of these orders, you know, secret orders and so forth, it doesn't mean that God has given up with them. You know, God loves them as much as he loves you and I. And it's going to take some real personal conviction on the part of these gentlemen to be able to see themselves in a light that heaven sees them. But nobody wants, really deep down inside, nobody wants to be lost. Everybody wants to find the answer. They understand that, you know, these are the testing grounds that we're on. And just like the Puritans, you know, they wanted to make everybody else pure just like them. That the moral majority had the same concept, you know, that we have to make people pure by force. And I believe that, you know, back in the day, as you mentioned, there was people that actually got, I believe, people from the Quakers. The Quakers were actually, you know, they became martyrs, you know, by the Puritans in this country. And the Puritans really thought that they were doing the will of God. But God has to reach the heart. God has to cut through all of this erroneous ideology and philosophy that we've been brainwashed in order for him to help us to see clearly what our mission is and, you know, what our destiny is in this life.
Yeah. Paul, anything?
No, I did want to, Pastor Tucker mentioned Calvin, and there's a school of, and that I'm glad you mentioned that, because most people who consider themselves Calvinists or Calvinistic way of looking at prophecy, they point back to Israel. And so it makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense because their way of thinking is, okay, Israel are God's people and we need to save them. And so that's where the issue has come in, because they think that along with the trying to make the United States more moral, they also think it's their responsibility from a biblical standpoint to uphold Israel because they are God's original people, which of course connects to Calvinist way of thinking.
All right, let me jump into this again, because I want to move this on. There's a lot more, because y'all just brought up the Calvinists and things of that nature, and in this interview that is mentioned here, right? It is mentioned here. I believe that a lot of them do have a Calvinistic viewpoint. However, I'm going to let this thing play, and I want you guys to go ahead and we'll go ahead and react to that.
So one of the things that I wanted to kind of first start us off with is, it's my understanding that the Christian nationalist movement is really an answer to some of the godless atheism and secularism that we have seen become rampant in our society. And, we have a lot of things that I think we as Christians, and anybody who calls themselves a Christian, should have a fundamental problem with happening in our society. We have abortion that is rampant, killing of unborn babies. We have gender that has been turned into an alphabet soup. We have marriage that has been perverted. We have drug use in many cities now openly, much more so than previous. I mean, you have people using fentanyl and bent over with the fentanyl bends, I mean, you have society has degraded. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question that we all have to answer, we all have to be able to answer it as Christians, is what stems the tide of moral pollution and corruption in this world today? We here at this table are Seventh-day Adventists, and Seventh-day Adventists historically have been, typically ones that say that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and so we should treat our body in accordance with that. We have a strong emphasis on health principles, on, making sure that we're sober-minded, not consuming alcohol and other illicit substances, and historically wanting to uphold biblical truth. And so, Stephen, you come from a Christian nationalist background, and I'm sure that you would probably agree and resonate with the moral pollution that we have seen, although I don't want to put words in your mouth. How do you see Christian nationalism answering this corruption that we see?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. I could go on and on about that. So I'll try to keep it brief. But I mean, the idea is that Christian nationalism, or just a robust Christian politics, is a way to energize people to get into the political process and advocate for Christian ideas, or simply even just natural truths that have been kind of smothered, and to within the institutions themselves, from the political parties to the bureaucracy to the broader institutions of society, that they would get in those institutions and shape them so that they would, reform the country in a moral and pious direction. So there's a lot I can say on that, but that is kind of the central aim. The central aim is, at least from my perspective, is to provide the philosophy by which other people, I mean, including myself, but other people who are better at the on the ground politics, can then go and achieve things in a concrete way in the world. So it's a broad movement of people doing different things. I'm just one part of it. And I just, again, try to supply the principles and the ends of political action so that people can get involved and have a powerful presence in our institutions.
I would like to say that the very people that the very thing that they are raising question about, how do we go about looking at the nationalist movement in this country. But the question is, who controls the narrative? Who controls the narrative when it comes to like the problem of the war on drugs? We know that Senior Bush, before he became the president of the United States, he was up to his eyeballs with Noriega and all of those drugs that was coming into the United States, stamped top secret, was illegal drugs. But they made Noriega the fall guy. But the guy that was head of the CIA, who became the president of the United States, he was very much involved with the drug trafficking. And so you're fighting against something, and you got insiders that is creating the narrative that you're asking, how can we come up with a solution to? And so the whole agenda is order out of chaos. You got the people that's running things, that's creating chaos, and out of chaos, they figure that we can bring about some kind of control. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In other words, synthesis is a solution to the problem that you created, as a problem in the country. So you got to find out who are the movers and the shakers. Who are the ones that's creating the chaos? So you can formulate these organizations and you can say, well, we have to come up with a solution to the problem. But it's almost like the fox that's guarding the chicken coop. You got to deal with the fox, because the fox is what's causing the chaos and the turmoil, in the first place. And a lot of people simply don't see that. And now they're coming along. We got to put out this fire. Why are you going to put out the fire and you're not concentrating on the people that are starting the fire?
Easy. Very easy. I mean, this is what the Hegelian dialect is all about. Why would you want to concern yourself with people who are starting the fire? Matter of fact, they're not the problem. The problem is you. The problem is you. You're not there with the fire, right? So that's exactly how they're going to look at God's people very soon. So, Pastor Tucker, question for you. You brought up Calvinists. You brought up the Calvinistic, historically how the Calvinists behave and what brought the Puritans to America. Question for you. Were Calvinists political people? You're on mute, bro. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, so Calvinism very political. So again, Calvinism is, you could argue, without a lot of the trappings of Roman Catholicism, you could argue really is Catholicism in Protestant drag,
Right.
if you want to say that. And unfortunately, they intrinsically believe that church and state should be united. So while they renounced Catholicism in principle, so they were saying the church and state under Roman Catholicism is bad, but the church and state under Protestantism is good, which
Right.
again just shows you the cognitive dissonance as it pertains to that. And a lot of this really just stems from the misunderstanding of the gospel. So even as in the video, they're talking about all of these moral corruptions, and it's true, there are a tremendous amount of moral corruptions. But to just give you an example, if you go back to the early centuries, in that first century, after Jesus ascended and the gospel was going out to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, when you read in Revelation chapter 6, in describing the first phase of the Christian dispensation, where it mentioned how that rider on the white horse going forth conquering and to conquer.
Mm-hmm.
For those of our listeners that may be familiar, there was a particular place called Pompeii that was destroyed in 79 AD by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Now, mind you, Pompeii, essentially everything that we saw in the Epstein files, the things that Diddy has become notorious for with the Diddy parties and all those things were taking place times 100 in Pompeii. So just emphasizing the fact that the world has always had moral corruptions, but the solution that God has always given has been the faithful preaching and demonstration of the gospel. And as the apostles were taking the gospel to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people again, as men voluntarily surrendered their hearts to the Lord, they themselves were reformed from within, and this reformation came from without. So, for dear brother Wolf, he's not understanding that seeing these moral corruptions is even in one sense, an indictment of the powerlessness that the church has in this generation. And it has been eloquently stated by A.T. Jones, other Protestant historians, that when the Church of God loses the great and mighty power of the Holy Spirit, by default, it's going to look to a source in order to supply that which has been lost. And so, in because the church no longer has the spiritual power, it will look for the temporal power of the state in order to try to compensate for the lack of the Holy Spirit. So, since we can't reform man in the proper spiritual sense, let's look to the state to arbitrarily turn him into a Christian. But by default, because the state cannot make a Christian, it will in turn just make a population of hypocrites. And that is what Western Europe was when it was dominated by Roman Catholicism. It was essentially mass populations, predominantly of religious hypocrites. And so if Christian nationalism is propagated in a society, it will just be a nation of hypocrites. And so again, these dear brethren do not understand that the solution to these moral corruptions is not arbitrary legislation, but it's more faithful preaching of the gospel. Mind you, what if at all of these rallies talking about bringing America back to God and all of this, what if these times were used as seasons of deep spiritual revival? We see what's taking place with abortion. We're currently in Pride Month. We see all the sexual immorality and all these things. How about this be a greater call to us as Christians to set our houses in order? Part of the reason why homosexuals and lesbians and people who are transgender and all that have so many arguments against God's ideal is because so many of us as Christians are hypocrites in our own homes. How many Christian pastors are cheating on their wives? How many Christian pastors are secretly homosexuals in the closet? And
Right.
so, in one sense, we can't get sanctimonious about all this corruption that we see in the secular world, but yet we see all of this moral hypocrisy
In
in
the
the
church.
Church of God.
Right.
Yep,
Brother Paul, he hit the nail in the short place.
he did. Well, I'm gonna do something different. You guys mentioned I heard someone mention uh, Papa Bush. Okay, and I wanted to look at something. Do you know? I don't think that things have changed much, and I don't want to. I don't want to derail the conversation to go talk about this. Things haven't changed much in terms of the Vatican and the powers that be. They're not playing checkers.
No,
They're playing chess.
4D. They're playing 4D chess, bro.
That's right. They're playing chess. And in 1991, when Papa Bush was making statements about the New World Order, and for those, and I recall hearing this. I'm in my upper 50s, and I recall hearing this statement in 1991. J.D. Vance was only 6 years old.
Right.
And now he's sitting as our current vice president. And so when I say that they're playing chess, and I'm not picking on Vance or none of these people, okay? But based upon my way of thinking, all of these young brothers, these so-called leaders that we have now, they were trained have been trained for a very long time, and we're starting to see these things play out right now. I mean, I don't know if I don't want to talk about who he's married to. I'm not going to even go there. But all I can say is 6 years old was how old this guy was in 1990 when those statements are being made. And now today we hear the very same person who is the current vice president made the very same statements about the New World Order as Papa Bush did. So I wonder and I'm just wondering. I hope I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything. I wonder if these guys have been set up from a long time ago, and they were trained from their youth. And where else did we see that play out? We saw that play. We saw it play out in
Daniel chapter 1.
Daniel chapter 1. We saw it play out in Daniel chapter 1. We saw it played out back in the early 1900s into the 1940s, where somebody had he trained some youth to think like he did.
Well,
and that was Mr. Hitler.
That's
so we
right.
see these things playing themselves out right now. I just hope that those of us who are paying attention to Bible prophecy, that we don't get caught up, because some of us get caught up choosing right or choosing left. I'm talking about voting wise, That's right, and we get caught up in these political things and not realizing we get caught right in the middle, and we become part of that training. Maybe nobody didn't sit us down and say to eat of the king's food, but we get caught up in the training, just like some of those other Hebrews that were unnamed during the time of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Yeah, Brother Paul, when I came on, you were talking about Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg, started out very young, but she has she's being homed. I'm waiting for Greta Thunberg to kick in again later on.
She's been already out there.
Oh, she's already out there. Yeah. Well, she's going to be out there even greater, because they're using her and they're homing her, just like Barack Obama. Barack Obama was homed and refined under Brezhnev. What is his?
Zifnok. Something Zifkov or something like that. Yes.
Yes, the guy with the white hair.
Yeah.
He was homed by that guy to prepare him to be the president of the United States. And as I mentioned, it's a known fact that Barack Obama is a Prince Hall Freemason. So he is, they home these guys. They prepare these people, and they have no history. It's almost like Melchizedek just pops in the history and pops out. Maybe that's a bad illustration to use, but where did these guys begin? They were home. They had no history behind them, and then all of a sudden they pop on the scene. They're used for a particular purpose, and then when they don't need them anymore, all of a sudden they pop out, kind of like not Bill Gates, but Fauci. Fauci, he popped in, he did his dirty work, now he popped out. Nobody's talking about this guy anymore.
They are. Remember, Fauci's been around since the 70s, since the mid-70s, with AIDS and all that kind of stuff. So he's been around for a very long time. But the thing about it, Paul, is that, yes, they do utilize young people. When you look at the, I believe it is, goodness, I don't want to, my train of thought was about to lose my train of thought here. The Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, right? You look at that, and you if you go back in history with the World Economic Forum, when you dig in, you start realizing people like Justin Trudeau. You start seeing people like, what's the young guy's name that's in Florida? That's the governor of California. What's his name? Governor of California, Newsom, and many others. I don't want to go off on a tangent there, but many of those, there were young men at those events. They would bring them when they were 14 and 15-year-old at those events.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing about it is not just the kids that they've groomed, but it's the parents and the grandparents. They don't come after the kids if the parents and the grandparents are not in cahoots with somebody in that system, a part of that system, right? So yes, just like we look at Daniel chapter 1, they want the young people. That's who you want, because young people have the mind sponge and they have the energy. If you look at what's going on today with all the rioting and all the protesting, who are out there? Young people, right? You get them in college, you get them in high school, you you get their minds to be warped and twisted, and all of a sudden you have that. Now let's get back to this situation with Stephen Wolfe here, right? We listened to what he said, and the reason why I asked you about the political movement, the Calvinists being politics or get into politics, is because you heard what Stephen Wolfe said. Basically, in a nutshell, Christian nationalism is setting people up in the political sphere so that they can make changes and reforms in the nation. Right? That's what you're hearing. That's what you heard. So now let's go ahead and play some more, because it will start getting deeper and deeper as it goes on, as those questions start coming. Listen to the words that he says and how he plays it out.
And in your book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, obviously you have enumerated that you believe in, or at least what I'm seeing is that in advancing first table commandments in the Decalogue, what would you view as a panacea or a sufficient law or legislation specifically regarding the fourth commandment?
Well, I know that people, I don't know if you guys, but I know that people, I don't know if you guys, but people in your general camp have talked about this idea of a national Sunday blue law. I've never in my life advocated for a federal law that would mandate a Sunday Sabbath or rest or blue laws. I think those would be unconstitutional because there's no power given to the federal government to make that sort of thing in the Constitution, in the Articles. And apart from the First Amendment issues, if there are any, so I'm against that. Also, I just don't think it's enforceable, because the federal government, unless they have an agreement with the state, has to enforce their own laws. So I think it's kind of a preposterous idea. I've never heard of it until someone accused me of believing it, actually, nor have I denied it, because I thought no one would think that would be plausible. But when you think about the local levels, the state and local levels, it would have to depend upon the composition and characteristics of those people. I think if you have a largely Protestant county or a largely Protestant state, then you can have laws that shut down ordinary commerce on Sundays, and the intent there would simply be to create conditions that would encourage worship. So it wouldn't be compelled worship. It wouldn't be compelling people to have faith. It would simply create outward conditions such that people can put away ordinary earthly concerns so that they can focus on.
All right, I'm gonna get back to the video. Let me get back to the video. I wanted to point something out real quick. He used the word panacea, and I want others to understand what the word panacea means, because it has, I believe, it has two meanings. Pastor Tucker, correct me if I'm wrong, but this panacea means something that is concrete or leveled, or that will be fashioned as a law, right? Am I wrong with that?
Panacea, is that referring to when he was talking as far as he doesn't believe in a national Sunday law? Is that referring to?
Yes, he doesn't. But panacea, but basically that word panacea, and I took it down somewhere and I can't remember where I put it.
It says that panacea is a hypothetical remedy or universal solution that
that's what
claims
it is.
to cure all diseases, illnesses, or solve all difficulties.
Well, those are the two things, right? That's why I said we got to be careful where in what context he's using it. He's using it as solve all issues, universal law, right? That's what he's using it as. Yeah. And I wanted to pause. I'm gonna get back to the full video, but because he said panacea, you can think, oh, is this a medical term? Why is he using that, right? But he's yeah, I'm coming back to you. He's utilizing that as a universal law. Okay, so let me get back to the video real quick. I just want to make sure I stated that.
And in your book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, obviously you have enumerated that you believe in, or at least what I'm seeing is that advancing first table commandments in the Decalogue, what would you view as a panacea or a sufficient law or legislation specifically regarding the fourth commandment?
Well, I know that people, I don't know if you guys, but people in your general camp have talked about this idea of a national Sunday blue law. I've never in my life advocated for a federal law that would mandate a Sunday Sabbath or rest or blue laws. I think those would be unconstitutional because there's no power given to the federal government to make that sort of thing in the Constitution, in the Articles. And apart from the First Amendment issues, if there are any, so I'm against that. Also, I just don't think it's enforceable because the federal government, unless they have an agreement with the state, has to enforce their own laws. So I think it's kind of a preposterous idea. I've never heard of it until someone accused me of believing it, actually, nor have I denied it because I thought no one would think that would be plausible. But when you think about the local levels, the state and local levels, it would have to depend upon the composition and characteristics of those people. I think if you have a largely Protestant county or a largely Protestant state, then you can have laws that shut down ordinary commerce on Sundays, and the intent there would simply be to create conditions that would encourage worship. So it wouldn't be compelled worship. It wouldn't be compelling people to have faith. It would simply create outward conditions such that people can put away ordinary earthly concerns so that they can focus on the purpose of that day, or at least the purpose of that worship, which would be more heavenward. So in other words, it just conduces to healthy worship without forcing.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Before you even dealt with the idea of a panacea, the guy already told you in so many words what he understands and what he believes. In other words, he understands the powers, that operate and how they can create the atmosphere for change. This is where this ecological, devastation is going to create the atmosphere for change. You can't compel people unless you create the climate for change. And this is what they're going to do. This is the ace in the hole for the powers that shouldn't be, that is ruling, namely Rome.
Yeah, I want to bring on a few points. One, he has advocated for blue laws before, based upon his book. And we're going to go through that as well. Two, he very well knows his history. Okay. It's one thing to play aloof, right? As I've never heard of the Sunday blue laws before. It's a play on words. Okay.
It's all foolishness.
It's all play on words. But he knows very well about the Sunday blue laws. He just very say, I never knew that it'd be a national thing, right? Well, no blue law is actually national, right? And that's the truth. Blue laws are not national, they're statewide. So he knows very well that that's not the case, but he's playing coy to, how the question was phrased to him. And it's based upon what he has written and just kind of played it in the backtrack way. But the thing about it is what I'm gathering, and I know, from the full video, you can kind of tell, I love the way those brothers spoke to him because it kind of opened him up to gaining more information about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? However, I always look at this at two sides. He's also pulling information to go back and to do his research to rebuttal or to come up with something stronger as a different argument, because there are things that he said that he's standing on because he asked certain questions. But I wanted to bring that out there. Pastor Tucker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just piggybacking on your point of what everybody else is communicating. Unfortunately, our dear brother Wolf is engaging in a species of spiritual gaslighting. He honestly sounds like a seasoned politician. who,
Yes.
instead of directly answering the question, is evading it by a pretense of ignorance on a point that he clearly understands.
Very
To
well.
say that you're not trying to encourage a federal law enforcing Sunday legislation, but you're encouraging everything that leads up to the legislation of a Sunday law, it's nonsensical on its face. But part of, we know, with deception, it seeks to play upon people's ignorances. And so if I can, spew out all of this word salad, hopefully it'll confuse you enough in order to make you believe what I'm actually communicating is the truth.
Right.
And so, to the point, this is why, even what Pastor Green was mentioning, history, especially in this context, is really important to understand, because these are a lot of histories that are not understood. I mean, especially even among evangelicals, it's a very popular ideology now to be teaching that the idea of church and state is not in the Constitution. This is something that is really being pumped by a lot of individuals. Even Ben Carson, the professed Seventh-day
Mm-hmm.
Adventist, close to Donald
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trump, is communicating that the idea that church and state should be separated is not in the Constitution, and all of this. And this is part of the problem, that a lot of the Christians, even again Seventh-day Adventists, who should be standing in defense of proper principles of civil and religious liberty, are merely acquiescing to the power that they are close to. And
Right.
so, especially with the gentleman, because he has been so brought up in this civil and spiritual outlook on reality, he has convinced himself that it is the truth.
Mm.
And we're told very clearly in evangelism that when someone has been believing error for so long, that they're not going to immediately dislodge from that. And Jesus communicated this very clearly, that when new truth is communicated to the mind, that new truth is not immediately grasped, but the old is seen as better.
Right.
And
Right.
so, even when Jesus was preaching and teaching the unadulterated gospel, the Pharisees were accusing him of destroying the law. Mind you, the very law that he was vindicating by his teaching, they were accusing him of destroying, to the point that they literally called Jesus, the divine Son of God, Satan. They called him
Beelzebub.
Beelzebub.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when it comes to men like that, one, yes, they do have to be met and opposed. They do need to be communicated to systematically, that ultimately what they're communicating is not Protestantism. And
Mm.
that's really just the sad reality, again, to the point that has already been mentioned, that many of these men, and they consider themselves sons and daughters of the Reformation, but at the same time do not advocate the principles that the reformers advocated. Now, mind you, we talked about the spiritual hypocrisy of John Calvin. We talked about some of those things, and many of the reformers, again, because they were coming out of the eras of Roman Catholicism, there was a lot of things that they believed that were erroneous. But at the same time, there was an agreement in the understanding of justification by faith, that we're saved by grace through faith, and everything that the Bible communicates pertaining to the principles of conversion, and also the reality of the Roman Catholic institution and its fight against the unadulterated gospel of Jesus Christ. But the problem is, as we are told in Great Controversy, and again A.T. Jones and P.T. McGann and many others, that in order to give force to this idea of Christian nationalism, you have to call upon the power that undergirds the bedrock of the philosophy that you're advocating, and that institution is Roman Catholicism.
Mm.
Because what institution knows better as to how to enforce its policies on a population, and to make even magistrates to be coerced to their ideas, better than Roman Catholicism?
Right. I look at Brother Paul as his word salad as a way of spiritualism, because spiritualism is believing a lie. And the way that he presented the first lie was, I never heard of anything like this before. You know, it's just all new to me. Where
Yeah.
this is how this is what they do because they already know the agenda. The agenda is to keep this thing quiet as much as possible because the Sunday law has to be worked in the darkness and worked in darkness. So if this is what they're doing, then is it truly spiritualism, Brother Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. The first time we see spiritualism being played out on this earth is in Genesis chapter 3,
Correct.
where he said, did the Lord really say did he say you shall surely die? I mean, that's it. This brother was so smooth when he came out with that. I mean, James came out direct with the question. He says, you advocate in your book.
Yeah.
The first, pushing the first four of commandments, which our Constitution doesn't touch, other than saying what it says in the First Amendment. But and then he went right around the question, and it was so crafty. It was like smoke and mirrors. I used to watch these magic shows sometimes. Not that I should be watching them, and these guys, while they're showing you the cards over here they're doing something else, and that's exactly what I saw. I mean, and then he said it with a smile on his face. It was crafty. It was, I don't want to say, dare I say,
he disarmed the listener. For the listener who's listening to him, he disarmed him by smiling. And by picking up himself, and the body language changed everything to the point where you're looking at him speak, but you're not really hearing what he's saying. But but subconsciously you're picking it up. Yes, Obama was very good to that. Very good.
Yeah, it was so crafty, but that's how the enemy plays it. And his followers, either on purpose or by default, do the very same thing that the enemy does. And they say, will the Lord really destroy you for eating this fruit? The answer is yes. I mean, so and by the way, when he asked, he didn't even address the Sabbath question. He literally, instead of when James, was pointing out the Sabbath question to him, he said, how, in light of being, the Sabbath commandment, the fourth commandment, how would you address that? He doesn't even answer the question. And then when he gets around the corner and comes back on the other side of the corner, he brings up Sabbath being Sunday and having shutdowns on Sunday. So you see where his agenda is. His agenda, ignored. He already knew that these are Adventist brothers that had the word of God in front of them. He ignored their question and then came. I wish I could see the rest of it, and I'll probably check it out later. But it says, and then he went back and says shutdowns on Sunday. So what's he pushing as? What's he pushing as the Sabbath? He's pushing Sunday.
That's why I said that the papacy controls the media, and that's one of the reasons why Walter Veith refers to the media, or refers to those people who have been homed in acting as Jesuit theater. I mean, this guy is very, very, very smooth, and many of the politicians that have been pushed to give leadership, they have first been homed in acting and deceiving, and these are the people, that can show you, that can be saying one thing and then show you the other hand to divert your attention, because they have been perfected in that.
Smoke and mirrors,
deception.
Yep,
Right?
deception, smoke and mirrors. Let's get to the. I got two more, and then we're gonna close it out.
In an interview that we observed with Douglas Wilson, one of the remarks that he made is that he does foresee in the future a national honoring of the Lord's Day.
I do believe that the Sabbath is going to be part of a reformation of our morals. I don't believe the fourth commandment has been retired in any way. So if there is a national reformation and revival, I believe that will result in a national honoring of the Lord's Day. I do believe that that's going to happen. This is the extent of the persecution that I'd be willing to deploy against a Seventh-day Adventist. He would not be able to go into a shop and buy a shovel. That's how That's the extent of the
Right.
That would be
Well,
the
it's funny.
extent of the persecution.
And so, certainly in Project 2025, there was a call for a federal amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act. So, at least on some sense, there are some voices out there that are calling for a federal legislation in that regard. Would that be something that you would support as a means of advancing what you see as Christian principles in our nation? Would you support legislating on a federal level?
No. I again, like I said before, I mean, you meant like the Fair Labor Act. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, but or what that legislation would entail. But in terms of shutting down ordinary commerce on a Sunday, that would not be within the powers of the federal government, nor would it be feasible to enforce. Again, unless, again, there is an agreement with the states to do it. But if the states already agree to do it, why don't the states just have their own law? I would prefer all these things to be at the state or county level, where they are better, where they're actually enforceable, and also they're tailored properly to the characteristics of the people themselves. And I mean, again, this was part of the wisdom of the First Amendment, which was not to separate God from civil government, nor was it to separate church entirely from state at the state level. It was just meant to constrain Congress, because that's the first word of the First Amendment. So I think it's best to keep these sorts of things at the local level, and for several reasons.
Okay, you seen that, you heard that. Few things that I caught. Number one, of course, the gentleman before that was brought up a no buy, no sell as a way of punishment, as a joke. Okay? And we can see that, again, my dear brother Stephen Wolfe backtracked a little bit again on the question that was asked him, do you find this to be, as a crisis to come? He says he never heard of the Fair Labor Act. I am befuddled, Pastor Tucker.
Yeah, again, he's speaking like a seasoned politician, and it's no arbitrary indictment upon him. Again, by the grace of God, the Lord is seeking to reach him with the gospel of his grace. And as I've seen a couple of persons have mentioned in the chat, he clearly has gifts and talents that the Lord would be very pleased to have converted and used for the proper proclamation of the gospel. And certainly, if he ever watches this particular broadcast, brother, I just hope that you know that we're praying for you, that you come into a full and proper understanding of the message of salvation. But unfortunately, our dear brother is communicating error. And sadly, these errors are damnable heresies because, again, it's a complete violation of basic gospel principles. And a lot of this, again, is just coming down to him not understanding the gospel of Jesus Christ. But again, even on the point of what Doug Wilson was mentioning as far as what he was saying, so he's dead serious about the Sunday law and all of those things. But he was joking about what would be the punishment for the Seventh-day Adventists, thus violating those said principles. Now, mind you, they won't come outright and communicate in regards to a death penalty and all of those things, but that is only the logical conclusion of advocating these principles. Because in order for Roman Catholicism to enforce its heretical teachings, by default, if you're going to act like God, you need a means by which, in order to control the conscience, and you do that by means of the Inquisition. So by default, you can't practice Roman Catholic principles without having an inquisitorial institution. So yes, this dear brother Wolfe and Wilson and so on and so forth, of course, because there isn't the public outcry for Christian nationalism and a national Sunday law and all of this, they have to be very soft with how they present this on a public platform. And obviously with social media, these videos and YouTube, this technically is forever. So they don't want to be misinterpreted and taken out of context and all of this, but we can certainly rest assured that as public support for this reaches a climax and a zenith, they are going to be very unashamed of communicating what their sentiments are. To give a case in point, give another example. So, for another point that is embedded in Christian nationalism is the ethnocentric ideology of white supremacy. Now, for our audience that may not be familiar with what I'm saying, again, we talked about the Puritans. The Puritans again believed that they were the children of Israel entering into the promised land, that ethnic demographic of the Puritans were an ideal level of superiority, and that essentially they were God's gift to the world from a Christian standpoint. Mind you,
Hmm.
this same type of religious ethno ideology, again, is what was dominating the South during the time of the American Civil War. He was talking a lot about leaving all of this Sunday law and all of this, leaving this to the states. Mind you, these were the same arguments that the slave owners were giving during the time of the Civil War, mentioning that the federal government had no authority to force us to free these slaves, that the
Hmm.
federal
States'
government
rights.
has states' rights and all of these things.
Hmm.
And mind you, yes, the Constitution does emphasize the importance of states' rights and all these things, but not at the expense of basic human rights. And so
Hmm.
while he is advocating quote unquote states' rights, as again, the call for all of this reaches a climax, they are going to be unashamed. They will have no problem in the federal government forcing this because the federal government will agree with their ideology. So, this is essentially the point. When the federal government agrees with what they're teaching, they're for it. When the federal government doesn't, that's when they start to advocate the states' rights.
I think that a microcosm, what I think it was Wolf, he made mention of the fact that the extent of the persecution that would come to Seventh-day Adventists is they'll go to a store on Sunday and they won't be able to buy a rake or they won't be able to buy some kind of a tool. But I believe a microcosm of what they're talking about is when I was at Andrews University, there was a person very, very well known in, Berrien Springs, Michigan. He owned a hardware warehouse. And on Sabbath, everything was shut down. And every time you turn around, you look in the paper, there was an article about Mr. Trickett. He was one of the professors at Andrews University. I think his name was Trickett. And he taught finance at Andrews. And they were writing articles in the newspaper complaining about him shutting things down on the Sabbath because most people, outside of our church, that's when they do their work on Sabbath. And they couldn't buy anything on that day because he was a Sabbath and he shut his business down on Sabbath. Now they're using that as a microcosm. But the difference with Mr. Trickett and the government is that Mr. Trickett didn't have the power to legislate that on a national level or on a global level. But eventually they are going to mandate that everything is shut down. And if you try to go contrary to that, you can be at risk of being locked up.
Paul?
Hmm. I didn't. Well, no. Let me make this comment. No, I won't make that comment. I did see someone was. I'm glad, Brother Samuel. I'm glad you brought up the association between Christian nationalism and even some of the ideology that was taking place with states' rights, which we saw in the Confederate States, because that's what they were also pushing. I know a lot of people think it was all about the Civil War was all about slavery. No, it had a lot to do with states' rights
Religion.
and
Religion.
yeah, and religion. And right here, the brothers just literally said the statement. Because if all the states if all the states vote in a Sunday blue law, and we vote that in counties and locally and statewide,
Then guess what
guess
happens to
what?
the federal? The federal takes it
You
on
don't
and say,
need
hey,
to have
federal.
exactly.
You don't need it.
to have a national state. That's right. You don't need to have a national law because it'll be all around. What am I going to do? I'm going to go to.
It'll be national because all the states in America is doing it.
That's right.
So
that's
if
right.
it goes
That's right.
statewide,
So
that's exactly where they want it, right? They want it for statewide because why? Wherever you go is going to be there. The difference is though, is that if it's mandated federally, and of course, federal government controls the money, they control the CBDC, they control this, they control that, then guess what? The federal government now controls overall, not just the United States of America, but the way that things are going to go. Everybody looks to America for what they need, right? You can clearly see what's going on today, that Trump is pushing everybody to come to America for their needs, right? For whatever they want. So guess what? You're going to have to capitulate. You're going to have to say, yes, master. We will change our laws if America says, hey, listen, Sunday's a day of rest. I don't care what country you live in, but Sunday's a day of rest. Why? Because it's a federal law, and the president can now push that across the rest of the seas. It's not just a state thing. So that's the reason why the whole world has to wander after this beast. It must. It must.
And this is why, for those of you who took U.S. government and history, I mean, these things are so important because that's how we're running the country. I mean, if my state, I mean, where I live here in Tennessee, makes a law, and the congressmen that are here support that, they're the ones making the laws. And all we need is a majority states to fall in line, and then
32
Sunday Blue laws are voted in place, voted into law.
I believe it's 32 majority states. Okay, and that's not hard to get. That is not hard to get. So we're coming down to the last two, and I want to we're gonna close out the conversation, but there is a lot in here, man, to unpack, and we're gonna continue unpacking as we go on. So let's check out the clip number 4.
Right. I guess the reason why we ask that is because, Project 2025, the section written by Jonathan Berry specifically says that they want to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act to pay people time and a half for time worked on Sundays. And they say it would default to Sundays, but then they also have an exemption clause in there for other faiths, basically other faith traditions. And then you also had the Heritage Foundation more recently than Project 2025, because Project 2025 is kind of a little bit old news at this point. I mean, Donald Trump is in place at this point, and there was a lot of discussion about Project 2025 before before he was elected. But now in 2026, you've had the Heritage Foundation come out with Saving America by Saving the Family, a foundation for the next 250 years. Now, obviously, this coming summer is going to be this country's 250th birthday from 1776. And so, there's a lot of celebrations that are taking place in Washington, D.C. They're going to have the National Day of it's the National Day of Prayer, I believe, or something on May 17. And then they're also having a big celebration on July 4. And basically there's all kinds of events going on in D.C. that whole time. So when the Heritage Foundation writes this article about a foundation for the next 250 years, they're kind of saying, okay, how far have we come as a nation? Quite far. We're now the most powerful, nation on earth. What's going to happen in the next 250 years? And one of the things that they call for quite explicitly is a universal day of rest. And they say that state laws, once the blue laws have been repealed and basically gotten rid of, they're very difficult to reinstate. And so they say a universal day of rest essentially makes that easier and makes it so that it's no longer, repealed. Because what if you had a liberal state that is more atheistic? I think of some of the states like California or something like that. You're never going to get them to institute a blue law. At least I don't see it happening very easily for California. Now, maybe you could do it on a county level, like you're saying, Stephen, but you're probably not going to get them to do it on a state level. And so if that's the case, well, then a universal day of rest, according to the Heritage Foundation, would basically solve that problem. But that's interesting. I did not realize that you were against a federal day of rest. That's interesting.
Now you see how that was played out, where he's like, I didn't realize that you were against a federal day of rest. But the flip side of it all is that you can get a federal day of rest based upon, you don't even need California. You don't need none of the blue states. You already have enough red states to go for it if you really wanted to, right? And not only that, if you go countywide, guess what? Eventually, all it takes is a little bit of nudge for it to go, oh, it works. Oh, matter of fact, you know what? How many Catholics are Democrats in California? Right? It all it takes is for, oh, we have 15 counties in California, and all we need is 36 counties in California, and before you know it, you got the Catholic Coalition going into California and going, you know what, this needs to be a statewide situation. Let's make it a statewide situation, okay? And let's get the votes to do that. I mean, it doesn't take much, so it can happen in every state. And oh, by the way, once it does, then these congressmen and these senators are going back to DC and saying, why not we make this a national law, a federal law? Let's take it to the next level. So there's a lot of ways that this can play out. We don't know how it's going to play out, but we know that it will eventually play out. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, just to piggyback on that, and especially for our audience, the National Sunday Law is not merely going to be propagated from a Christian nationalist standpoint. Yes, we're talking about that in specific in this context right now, but the National Sunday Law is going to be presented as a solution to not merely just the moral corruptions that were communicated on the panel, as far as the issues with marriage and homosexuality and transgender and all those things, is going to be used as a means to solve the ecology problem. It's going to be used as a means to solve the economic problem. It's going to be used as a means to solve all these things. And whether you're a Christian, atheist, Buddhist, whatever ideological persuasion you are on that spectrum, the economy, religion, politics, one of those areas is going to affect you. And the National Sunday Law is going to be presented as a solution to that specific problem. Because even in Great Controversy, and this is explicitly communicating Revelation 13, that the image to the beast is going to be communicating to the people of the land that they should make this image to the Roman hierarchy, and that the great mechanism that's going to be used in order to get the people to do this is going to be the deceptions that this two-horned beast is going to do in order to bring this about. And then Great Controversy, just corroborating this, is mentioning that while we see apostate Protestantism, while we see the papacy, that Satan is seeking to sweep everyone, the whole world's population, under the ranks of spiritualism. So, as Satan uses the great mechanism of spiritualism, he's going to be able to get the atheist in California, to get the homosexual in California, to get the ecologist and all of these individuals to go along with this agenda, because spiritualism is going to be the great umbrella that everything is going to come under. And so it's not merely going to be the Christian nationalists that are going to be advocating this, but as the problems of the world reach its zenith, not to belabor the point, that Satan is going to use this as a means to solve all of these issues.
That's right. That's right.
And also in Volume 9, where Ellen White makes mention of the fact that, people's homes are going to be swept away. It's going to be conflagration, Satan has control of the elements, and the laboratories, as she makes mention in Volume 9. When disaster and devastation is happening on a global level, along with spiritualism, along with, people say natural disasters, but I say man-made disasters, a lot of that is going to cause people to, if not from a religious standpoint, but from the standpoint of saving the earth, they're going to go along with the legislation to shut everything down, thinking that that's going to be a solution to the problem.
Yeah. Man, Paul.
Yeah, I wanted to, since I am in the place of my dear brother, brother Jamal. God bless you, brother. Praying for you. I'm gonna mention something that he said, if he doesn't mind. He mentions that this, and this takes me to the point I wanted to share anyway. This is why it's so important for us to see and it was said by Larry earlier, that the framework for the gospel is found in the three angels' messages. And the first thing we're called to do is to come out of her, my people, and be ye separate. Come out and be separate. Well, I mean, and then we see that play out throughout the Bible. It's important, friends, that we don't get, and I'm going to stick to this because I see this as an Adventist. I see this as a Christian. Many people are getting caught up in politicism, and part of coming out of the system of Babylonianism is to forget about political ties and trust in what the Word of God says. Trust in what the Word of God says. Like my brother Jamal mentioned, now we see why God says to come out of Babylon. So I'll speak for my brother. It's time for us to come out of Babylon, not just calling the world out of Babylon, but those of us that are church members, whether it be Adventist or otherwise, to put aside worldliness and go directly to what the Word of God says. Thank you so much for sharing the point that the three angels' message is the framework of the gospel.
Yeah. I believe that not just, when you look at the third angel's message, that second angel's message tells you that Babylon is fallen, And, when you look at Revelation 18:1, we have to, it's a point to come out of her, right? Because it's a fallen nation, right? And you don't want to fall with Babylon. And whatever is in Babylon, I mean, you name it, it's in it, right? It's in it. We have to be above the fray. We have to be above. God wants us to rise higher and higher above the fray. If our mindset is always the same, whether it's racism, politics, whatever the case, all of these things are Babylonian. They're all Babylonian.
Yes.
And we have to be able to understand it and see that. That's the thing. Ask God to take out the eye, to take out the scales from our eyes and to give us eye salve that we may be able to see that. Let's look at this last one here, because very soon we are going to get persecuted. And one of the things that the other gentleman said, not Stephen Wolfe, I'm drawing a blank on his name right quick.
Doug Wilson.
Doug Wilson.
Doug
Thank
Wilson.
You. Yep. One of the things that Doug Wilson had stated was what Pastor Green had mentioned earlier. You go get a rake. The only persecution I'm going to give the Adventist is this: that when he comes to get a rake on Sunday, he can't be able to buy it. Well, he's talking about the no buy, no sell, right? That's exactly what he's talking about here. But I don't think he understands that, because he's looking at it from a position of economics and commerce, and we want to shut down commerce. But once the law is passed, it shuts down commerce for all who don't abide by that law. So let's take a look at what is being said now to refute this, because as a Seventh-day Adventist, we're going to bring it up, and let's see what was said by Stephen Wolfe.
So I guess the question I would have is, if we keep this, if the policies are advocated for at the state level, I guess the question I would have is, historically, how far should a penalty go to enforce such? I mean, certainly they've been advocated for at the state level previously. We have here the Chattanooga Sunday Times, where our people were arrested and put in chain gangs and had all kinds of persecution back in the late 19th century. And these were laws at the state level. Would that be something that you would, what kind of penalties would you support at the state level for those who don't agree with the Sunday legislation and who work on a Sunday?
I don't want to punt on the question, but I will say that it is a matter of policy. So it's not going to be a universal set of punishments. I don't know about the whole chain gang thing. It would seem to me that like nowadays it would be easier to do some sort of monetary consequence or financial consequence to ensure that at least people's businesses are closed to the public. In terms of the actual active work itself, I think people they're not compelled to attend church, but if they actively work on their own private property or even in their store itself, the law, to my mind, would be to just deny public access. So that would deny people a source of revenue for that day, obviously, because they can't sell their stuff. Unless I suppose people would drive onto private property and pick it up or whatever it is, whatever's enforceable. But I don't know the exact what would be the exact punishment for it, but it would have to be enforced. So if there is a law, there would have to be some sort of sanction involved with the behavior. I mean, one of the questions. So I don't know the history of what you're referring to, that Seventh-day Adventists were put in jail or chain gangs or whatever. A lot of times, if you read the actual penalties for crimes, the most severe side of it is either never or rarely actually brought upon anyone. But if there are historical instances of the chain gang, I just don't know. But again, I think that there are ways to tailor this so that it meets the end. The end of it would be maintaining a day of people focused not on earthly things, but higher things. It'd be a day where someone who is not inclined to go to church would be reminded to attend church because they can't go out and do ordinary commerce, and that would encourage worship. So in some ways, I think you guys, even though you would disagree with the day, at the very least, I think you guys could recognize that that sort of condition would be conducive to that end of worship, right? Because you guys, I'm assuming you guys you would affirm that worship on Sunday is valid, even if it has an illicit quality to it, right? There's an unlawful quality to it because it ought to be on Saturday. But if I attend church on Sunday, it's still valid in the sense that God is still worshiped by my church. I make that assumption. So even though you guys would disagree with, again, the law on that day, you still, I think, can recognize that law on that day could conduce to people worshiping God. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
No, actually, we would not. We would not agree with that. We would also reject the law if it were to be on Saturday. So we reject the law on the basis that it is coercive entirely.
There it goes. You seen that? You heard that. So again, when you the agenda is there, right? He couldn't steer away from the law itself because it has to have penalties. Why? Because it's a law. So what are those penalties? What would that look like? And he kind of spotted it out. He was like, well, it's going to have to be probably first make it a financial penalty. Financial for who? Well, for the owner of the shop. But no, it wouldn't be for the owner of the shop. It would be also for those who are actually buying and selling. Mm-hmm. And selling are the owners of the shop.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why we were talking earlier. You heard evangelists talking about electronic money. When money is taken out of circulation and everybody are giving debits and credits, you can control people, and that is coming. And that's one of the reasons why we are counseled, through God's servant and through the spirit of prophecy, that you need to get out. Get out of the cities. You need to move out into the country where you got some land, because they're going to use this whole concept of you're not going along with the program. We're just going to take your number out of the system and you're not going to be able to buy or sell. You need to be in a position where you can at least be able to eat, because these basic needs are what they're going to do to buffalo everybody in the direction that they want them to go. When people are hungry, they would do some very, very, very things that they would never imagine that they would do. But I'm telling you, in the cities, when those refrigerators go empty and they got those tanks that are blocking the main entrance in and out of these cities, and you start getting hungry, it's going to be chaos like you've never seen before. You need to get out of these congested areas now.
Paul, and then we'll end with Tucker.
I also saw where he talked about this monetary legislation. He didn't even hesitate to say that there'll be some kind of fine. There should be some kind of notice that, you know, if I live in a state where there's going to be a fine, that, you know, what am I going to do? Not be able to walk into a store, like he says. He says he believes that there should be some kind of sanction. So he didn't. He just kind of said, he smiled and said he believes there should be a sanction. He says that God should be, he says, you should believe, you should agree. Don't you agree that God should be worshipped on Sunday? And
I mean, I know that you guys don't agree the same thing, but I mean, you know, although we're worshiping on the wrong day, but as long as we're worshiping God, you do agree that on Sunday it should be okay, right?
That's what he said. That's what he said.
That was slick. That was real good. That was real smooth.
Oh yeah. James, I love James' response though, because James' response is so. I don't know whether it was Wagner that or Jones that said it. He said we would not agree whether it be on Sunday
James.
or on the Sabbath.
Absolutely.
Praise the Lord, man.
Not only that, for the reasons that it's being coerced.
Yeah.
Pastor Tucker, that's being coerced. I mean, look at how slick he did it, because he realized, look, I might just come out and say it. You know, Wilson had one time said, I think it was Wilson or the other black guy that they interviewed, because I have that interview as well. The young kid they interviewed. He says, it doesn't make a difference when y'all all going to worship on Sunday eventually.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So it for them, it's like we can play around the game. We can go around the circle with this thing and run around like rats. But eventually, we're all going to come to understand that you're going to have to worship on Sunday, right? That's the whole agenda, Pastor Tucker.
No, yeah, just to cooperate with everybody is saying, and as we all mentioned, that they're communicating this in such a way right now where it's the language is as soft as they can make it. So they're not going to overtly say all the draconian things. And this is how we're told in Revelation 12 that Satan works. That the Bible first mentions that the serpent cast out a flood after the woman, and then it mentions that the dragon cast out a flood after the woman. And so we know that the serpent is associated with deception and the dragon is associated with persecution. So Satan first uses deception, then he just uses overt persecution. And so that's what they're gearing all of this rhetoric up for. And they're trying to swindle the people that they're talking to in order to come on the bandwagon. And especially for those that are adhering to these ideologies, again, going back to the Puritans, this is how the Puritans functioned and operated. And again, they got a lot of this from Roman Catholicism. Again, this is how Catholicism pivoted itself during the Dark and Middle Ages. You know, just to give a case in point, associated with this Christian nationalism is again this ideology of ethno supremacy and religious supremacy. For instance, Pete Hegseth, for those that are not familiar, he's the Secretary of War. And Pete Hegseth, with a lot of personnel in the government, in the military, they consider themselves new and modern day iterations of the Knights Templars. They consider themselves to be this new generation's crusaders fighting against the Islamic scourge. And they feel that what's taking place over in Iran right now is just a reigniting of all of that. And so when we think about, again, this Christian nationalism and all these things associated with it, all of this is a part of it. And besides just the blue laws that we see here in the United States, it's eventually the desire to bring the United States fully to resemble, again, this image of the beast, to fully resemble what the Roman Catholic institution was doing during the Dark and Middle Ages. And I believe that we might have mentioned this before and maybe some other sessions. But when we talk about the image of the beast, we're currently living under that system. Unfortunately, there has been a gross distortion of many Adventist expositors' interpretation of Bible prophecy. And mind you, when I was not properly studying, I was communicating these same things, that the image of the beast and the United States becoming draconian, that this was going to be merely in the future with the Sunday law. But we are living under the auspices of this system right now, because the mark of the beast, the enforcement of all of these things, is merely going to be the icing on the cake that has already been baked.
Well, yeah, it's been baked. Is the we in the baking of the system right now. So yeah, we've seen what happened in 2020. We've seen draconian laws. We've seen how that worked out, right? How did it work out for us? Many people gave in. Many people caved, right? And then they came to you and said, you need to cave too. And these were the same people that was sitting next to you in the pew last week, right? The week prior, they were in the pew next to you, and then they came to you the next Sabbath and said, before you walk into this church, you need a mask, you need to wash your hands with some sanitizer and make sure, do you have your COVID card, right? I mean, that's how they treated us. Your same people, your same brethren, the same brothers and sisters, not people outside the world. These are the people that you were singing Amazing Grace, as part of the song of what they call that, praise and worship. Y'all was in the praise and worship. Jesus saves, right? God restores, right? And you're singing all these songs, and all of a sudden, when the crisis hit, you hit the shepherd, you scatter the sheep.
One of the things that is going to wake up a lot of people is when persecution comes, you're going to be able to recognize who your true brothers and sisters are in the church. And COVID, was a microcosm of what we can expect in the future. Even with this accident that I experienced, where I could have been dead, but I learned a lot about who my true brothers and sisters. I didn't realize I had so many people that really loved and cared for me. But then I also found out who really do not care for me, and that goes all the way from the top, all the way down. People that front being your brother, but then you realize that they don't care whether you live or die. And that's going to be the hard thing that I think that most of us is going to experience from these tragedies that's going to come. And you're sitting right next to somebody that you think that this brother is really a brother or a sister. And then you're going to find out that they're on the other side, and they've always looked at you as being the enemy, like enemy number one, but they have played, as a lamb in sheep's clothing. That's why that wolf guy is properly named.
Oh, he's probably named Stephen Wolfe.
Even just quickly to piggyback on what Pastor Green was mentioning, we're actually told in inspiration that to stand in defense of truth when the majority forsake us, to fight the battles of the Lord when champions are few, that this will be our test. That as remnant believers who believe in this third angel's message, the test again is not necessarily going to be the papacy and apostate Protestantism and all those things. It's going to advocate these truths when the majority of those who profess to be Seventh-day Adventists forsake this sacred faith. And so, as we're told, I believe it's in volume 7, either volume 5 or volume 7, where it talks about how we should gather warmth from the coldness of others, courage from their cowardice, and loyalty from their treason. So the prayer is that by God's grace, in light of all this hypocrisy, that we can even more so reveal the gospel of Jesus Christ, as Brother Paul was mentioning. Let's pray that the Lord will give us the moral courage, because I know that for a lot of our listeners, we're not used to doing practical evangelism. And again, as was mentioned, not merely handing out great controversies and glow tracks, but going and meeting our neighbors, opening up our doors. Again, Isaiah 58, besides talking about the overt demonstrations of medical missionary work, it talks about bringing the poor that are cast out to thy house.
Yes.
One of the greatest ways to do practical evangelism: cook
Just
some
open your
healthy,
doors.
plant-based vegan meals, invite your neighbors, have some good conversations, ingratiate yourself into the hearts of the people. And it is amazing, the types of evangelism that can be done even by these simple means.
Simple means, man. Simple means. So I don't want to leave you guys with just what we're just talking about here tonight. The Bible says, and I believe Pastor Tucker just used the word courage. Joshua 2, and verse 5 and 6 and verse 7. The Bible says, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, as I was with Joshua, as I was with Elijah, Elisha. You can go down the list of names: David, Paul, Peter, James. As I was with all of them, I shall be with you. Only be strong and of good courage. That's the word, courage. For unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto your fathers. So God has already sweared unto our pioneers the promise that he's going to give to us, that they have not seen yet. Many have not seen because they died in their grave by faith. But that land, that good land, the earth made new, is promised to us. Be strong and of good courage. Only thou be strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to the law. If you love me, keep my commandments. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus Christ. If you love me, keep and serve my law.
But I think that we should keep in mind, I believe it's Hebrews 11, the last two verses, where it says they will not be made perfect without us.
Right.
We are all going to receive the promise together.
Right. That's right. All going to receive that promise together. Brothers and sisters, one last point here by Sister White. And she goes on to say these words. She says, when the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce, I like that, to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then and only then, Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy and the infliction of civil penalties. You heard that tonight. You heard the word states, you heard the word counties, but this shall influence the state, one word, meaning that this is going to be one country. The state is also looked as the entire country. And the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters, such as ourselves, by God's grace, will inevitably result. Brothers and sisters, we said a lot tonight by God's grace, and I pray that God is moving you. Again, we all said the same thing tonight, that at the end of the day, the gospel must be preached. The third angel's message is the gospel in verity, and we must go out and preach and teach that message. That's the message for this time. That's the present truth. And I guarantee you, there is a lot of meat you can find in the present truth. In the third angel's message. It is the gospel in verity. It's preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let's do that now. Again, Mount Carmel Ministries, we're going to be in the streets. We are starting to work with other nonprofit organizations. And we want to meet with the people. We want to be there with the people. Because again, when I was hungry, you fed me, said Jesus. When I was thirsty, you gave me water to drink. When I didn't have any clothes, you put clothes on me. When I was homeless, you gave me a place to stay. God wants us to be that type of person. So let's go ahead and get out there. And let's go ahead and not just put great controversies in people's hands. No, that's too easy sometimes. And sometimes you find them in the trash can. but let's spend some time and talk with them. Get a phone number. You know what? Become the Bible to them. Let them see your life. Let them see how you live, that you live a Christ-like life. Because although we can give Bibles and we can give great controversies and steps to Christ, but if we live a life that looks like them, then our witness is in vain. Our witness is in vain.
Hey, Larry.
Yes, sir.
I had a box.
You had a box
of things from my garden that I was going to bring to you today in case you were hungry.
I am hungry, actually.
You are? I forgot to bring it.
The box.
I have the box sitting on my table, and I said, I'm going to bring this to Larry.
Is it a box of corn?
No, it's summer squash. It's
summer squash?
Summer
squash. Come on, man. I could have been eating something.
Oh, yeah, I got it, man. It's
I love
putting
summer
out.
Squash.
My garden is putting out like crazy, man.
I love summer squash, man. To God be the glory. Brothers and sisters, how long will you live? How long will you serve? I mean, how long? What am I saying here? How long will you serve two masters? If God be God, serve God. But if Baal be God, then serve Baal. But as for me and my house, brothers and sisters, we're going to serve the Lord. And as my dear brother Jamar will always says, it's time to say goodbye to all my Christian friends. Brothers and sisters, God bless you and happy Sabbath. And by God's grace, we'll see you guys on next week.